If I love you, I can't lie to you.
Of course you can lie to me. And you will. If you love me and you're going off with Maddie someplace, you're lying to me. Because what the hell do I care about the truth? I care if you're there. What Billie Holiday say, hush now, don't explain.
All right, I accept that.
Of course you'll lie to me, because I don't even want to care. What does the truth matter? And why are you going to be truthful with me when you lie to everybody else? You lied when you smiled at that cracker down the job, right? Lie to me, smile. Treat me the same way you would treat him.
I can't treat you the way I treat him.
You must. Because I've caught the frowns and the anger. He's happy with you. Of course he doesn't know you're unhappy. You grin at him all day long. You come home and I catch hell. Because I love you, I get least of you. I get the very minimum. And I'm saying, fake it with me. Is that too much of the black woman to ask of the black man?
Welcome to another episode of Shaken Not Stirred. I am your host, Martini, and today's episode is one that I think was a long time coming. After my guest and I first met on LinkedIn and did an episode in season 1 of the podcast. And this episode, as many of you are familiar with the short intro clip you just saw, we're going to attempt to replicate the conversation that took place more than 5 decades ago between the late and great Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin. But only this time, we're going to be providing more solutions than pointing out the issues between the black man and the black woman, not only here in the US, but all over the world, seemingly. Now, before we dive into the conversation, Jemiah, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself to the SNS audience and just share a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Hello, audience. My name is Jemiah. I am currently, getting accustomed to living in a new state. I recently moved to Alabama from Georgia, and it's been quite an adjustment. I am passionate about the restaurant industry, so I am a restaurant manager, and I'm just passionate about having fun, living life, just being a butterfly, honestly. And I'm excited about the conversation today. I don't get to have this conversation often, so I'm excited.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much, Jemiah, again, for agreeing to jump on the episode for season 2, the new season. And as you probably know me by now, I like to go straight into the meat of the day. And so for me, I think the first thing that I want to share as a solution to the issues between black men and black women, starting here in the US, but again, seemingly across the world or around the world, is that capitalism, racism, and so-called white supremacy or white patriarchy has, I think, from my estimation or from what I've been observing, distorted or done a disservice to black women and distorted their perception of the humanity of the black man. And so I think the first place to start would be to reprogramming. I think for black women, the first place to start would be reprogramming their minds to acknowledge and to see the humanity in black men. This is achieved by challenging any internal beliefs or biases or perceptions that most black women have about the black male or the black man. And to ask yourself literally, like, why do I see black men this way? Like, I wasn't born hating black men. I wasn't born thinking of black men in this negative light. Why is that? I can't be, me as a black man, I can't be of any worth or value to black women, because when black women see me, and I'm speaking as a collective, you see decades and decades of perceived abandonment from the black male protection, from black male covering, from the companionship of black men. When you see me, you see decades of emotional and physical and even psychological abuse at the very hands of those same black men, or those same men who are supposed to be protectors and providers or companions. You see decades and decades of silence of that abuse. You see an enemy. Now, this is something that I don't even realize, or I don't think most black women realize either. You see an enemy whom you have been made to believe to be your worst enemy because of how well crafted and well designed the system that created that reality for you has given you the perceived power over that enemy. The society at large, through various systems, and all of the ones that we are aware of and know of, has afforded black women at large, to a certain degree, the means to look at Black men as an inconvenience and disruption to their advancement and success, which is rightfully so. Black women, of course, succeeding is, for me and for many people, always a good thing. But if it's at the detriment of Black men, I think that's a very deadly and dangerous mindset to like embrace or continue to embrace. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. I would love to hear your response or any thoughts you have on those first few sets of deep and powerful words.
Deep and powerful words, so powerful. Well, so my take on this, my first take I'll go with is I don't believe Black men and Black women have had a chance to be seen as being like separate. So, I mean, how do I want to explain this? Black men, let me just jump into this. Black men, it seems like they don't know how to be alone, which, I mean, given the way that we were raised and the things that we were taught, and the way society makes it seem like you have to have another person. Um, I feel like when it comes to Black men, obviously, because that's what we're talking about, that they're not taught to be alone, and they're not really taught to be self-sufficient without seeking Black women for the support or whatever it is that they need. And honestly, I think they would benefit from a solitude, especially in this period right now where it seems like there's this like gender war and amongst the Black community happening right now. And yeah, I'm gonna drop it right there. I'm gonna drop it right there. Just to give you a little sprinkle.
No, so to your point about Black men having to first understand themselves or create a space where they are seeking or pursuing their internal growth and development, I 100% agree. 100% agree. That is something, of course, in a perfect world or an ideal world where there is a nuclear family as our ancestors understood it and established it, father, mother, child, that would definitely, of course, 100%, I'm all for it. Unfortunately, the world and specifically in the society that we live in, that's not the current setup. I don't know the actual stats. I looked at it the other day, but I know it's well above 70% of households, children are born in of single parents household. It's 70%. It's probably more than that now. But the last I looked, I know it was 70%. Over 70% of children, Black children born in America are born in single parent households. And so, yes, I do think Black men need to, I won't say put blinders on, but put the pursuit and the desire and the need to seek out after Black women and go within. 100% agree with that. Um, Now, I know that for me, when it comes to, this is something that I also wanted to bring up, speaking of single parent household or just parenting in general. Um, I think Black women would really, really do well in terms of their healing journey to approach their mother's parenting with the same level of scrutiny and criticism that they have for their father. Now, without going into details, if you've never heard of this before, I would submit to you and anyone else watching this to check this out. There's a report that came out in the 60s, just after Malcolm's assassination, mid 60s. And the report was conducted by a gentleman named Daniel Patrick Monahan. And the name of the report is The Negro Family, the Case for National Action. And what the report essentially found, and it's a controversial report. It's been debated on and pretty much given all types of scrutiny. But the report pretty much laid out what exactly was the crisis or the issue with the Black family in America. And this guy, Patrick Monahan, he argued that the rise in single Black mother families was caused not by a lack of jobs, because back then, during the civil rights movement, that unemployment was another a big factor in why Black folks are like, hey, something needs to happen here, America, specifically among men, unemployment rates. And so he stated it wasn't caused by a lack of jobs, but by the destruction in vain. He used the word ghetto. Of course, he was a white male, so that's very controversial for him to use it at the time. But vain ghetto culture, which could also be traced back to slavery times, as well as Jim Crow South, and et cetera, et cetera. So, in other words, the reason why, and this report, I'm telling you, it's a heavy report. I have it on my phone. It's public knowledge. The reason why the Black community in America is where they are predominantly, or the different factors that affect the Black community, is because of what happened during that period or that decade of American history, which of course is Black history as well. And so going back to the topic of single parent household, because, and it's a vicious cycle. Again, not to go back into how we got here, because most Black kids are raised in single parent household or single mother household, let me be more specific, and there's no father around. The perception of the father and whatever trauma or unresolved trauma that mother didn't reconcile, didn't resolve, is passed down to that child, along with their perception of their father, whether the father is there by choice or not by choice. And so I think Black women would do themselves a really, really, really huge service as it pertains to their healing journey, to look at not only their father and what the mistakes their father made and how their father wasn't there in their life and why, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but also aim that at mom as well, because it takes two. There's nothing that happens in a vacuum. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would definitely, like, the same level, the same energy you're giving your father, as far as scrutiny, as far as what he did and what he didn't do well, and et cetera, et cetera, aim that at mom as well, because they both came together to make you. You feel me?
Yeah.
Both contributed to whatever dysfunction, whatever imbalance, whatever trauma that you're still harboring or living with. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I actually agree with that point a lot. Um, and I guess I wanted to keep this objective, but to add just a little bit of lived experience in it. Um, I've been around women or women that's my age, so like 90s babies. And we've kind of had these little discussions of where our moms went wrong. So it's an interesting point that you bring up. Like we do, like at least for my age group, from what I've seen so far, we definitely do that. But like I said, that's a little piece of lived experience. I want to keep this as objective as possible because we all have our own backstories with life. But with that point that you said, I want to expand on the point that I had before about Black men benefiting from that solitude because of the household they grew up in, right? So it's like they grow up in a household like that, and then they're taught to go seek this woman who ultimately is going to be like another mother to him,
Mm-hmm.
and they never have time to focus on themselves because as soon as like there's no father in the home, so they're already being groomed to take on that role when they really don't have to. They shouldn't have to as a child. That shouldn't be their responsibility. So from that point, they're not really being taught the same thing that I would say most Black girls are being taught, like self-worth, self-value, um, just being self-sufficient, like things like that. Like we're usually taught to do chores, we're usually taught to cook, clean, and do all these things. But the boys, they're kind of just taught, go find a woman that does that, but not taught to do that. So it's like they never really take that time to heal from, whatever the situation may have been. And they're taught that, to be a man equates to the sexual relationships they have, if they end up having children, if they're able to, attract women that, like I said, are like their mom.
Right.
If there's, and so to keep expanding, I guess, there's no emphasis placed on encouraging the boys to figure out who they are as a person before they go and do that. They're pretty much just taking the trauma, putting the cherry on top, and just like, hey world, this is who I am. This is who I am as a Black man. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I need. And yeah, but I've always had this thought, like even with my guy friends, and they're Black, and the ones that would be considered promiscuous, I would say, I'm like, why do you feel like it's necessary, sir? Just be out here just spreading yourself around. Why?
Yeah.
Like, why do you do this? And I've had this conversation with a couple of my guy friends, and I tell them, like, you need to practice solitude and self-worth. Every woman does not deserve your body, and every man doesn't deserve a Black woman's body. Like, it's just, at some point you have to relax. In so many words, right? And I feel like that all goes back to childhood. Like, if they're taught that from the beginning, I think that would resolve some of the tension between Black men and Black women. Because, I mean, I hate to use this word, but the word I think of is thirsty. It makes Black men look thirsty. I hate to use that word, but I don't know another word right now. So we're just going to go with that.
The young folks will get it. If you were born in 90, 95 and up, you'll get it.
But yeah, so, I feel like just if more emphasis was placed on that, building the boys up and like you said, this would be the responsibility of the mother, if she is in the home by herself, to not bear that on the Black man. So that way he doesn't go out into the world thinking, this is, so.
Wow. All right. So you've shared some really, really great points, Jermaine, and I'm curious to know, or to hear your thoughts on Black men's mental health and the state of Black men's mental health, and what could be done to either increase awareness, or just what your thoughts overall on Black men's mental health.
So I would say, so number one, I want to say, I feel like Black men need to start, I don't want to say holding each other accountable, but communicating amongst each other about their own mental health issues, because I feel like there's a certain connection that Black men have with each other that Black women really can't feel. So I do want to mention that first. There's a way, it's like a certain little sweet spot that Black men just have with each other when it comes to those things, because they understand each other on that level. So, but then on top of that, also I want to mention for Black men and Black women, the domestic violence happening in Black households, and how that has always been and continues to be detrimental to the Black community. We haven't really progressed past that. I would call it an epidemic that our ancestors went through. It started with them. Most of us, I'm not going to say all, but most of us have seen, the dynamic between the mom and dad, or grandma and granddad, or however that dynamic was. So, we haven't really progressed past that. And if Black men focus more on their mental health, and if they were more aware of their neurological makeup, they would know certain things that trigger them in certain situations, like if there's a heated argument, or you just simply you're not agreeing with each other at that time, like they would understand more if they have like a personality disorder, or if they were schizophrenic, or if they have order, like things like that. So that way they could mitigate certain risk. So a lot of Black women are dying. You can look up the stats. There's a lot of Black women dying in the hands of Black men because, and I feel like it goes back to mental health, them not knowing, just what's going on with them. So if that was to be, I mean, it would. I don't think it would be resolved, but if it was to become more common for Black men to talk about it amongst each other and just kind of be aware and own it, that could definitely make a difference between the Black man and Black woman.
It's interesting, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on it, because as you were talking, this one thing came to my mind. I'm not sure if you ever heard of the elder by the name of Shahrazad Ali. Her name is pretty much, and if you haven't, I would submit to you, look her up. I'll send you her information. Shahrazad Ali has been a prominent figure in the Black community since the late 80s. And she's part of the Nation of Islam, and she in her book, she has a book, two books. The first one is Black Men's Guide to Understanding the Black Woman, and the reverse of that. But in the book, the first book, she describes how Black men slapping their wives are much better than uh, full-on extreme physical abuse and to the point of death. And it stirred up controversy. It stirred up controversy. You can look it up on YouTube. Just type in her name. You'll see tons and tons of videos of her. But I brought that up to say it's something that is real. Like there's no Black man, any Black man that says or refutes that Black women do die or are injured severely at the hands of Black men, uh, they're probably part of the problem as well. Or they're just that ignorant or don't understand or aren't aware enough to do the research and go out there and actually look. Um, so denial, any Black man that denies that there doesn't exist domestic violence, domestic violence doesn't exist in the Black community where Black men are being the aggressors and severely harming Black women up until the point of death. Yeah, I question that. But
Yeah.
to your point with Black men mental health, I think also it would benefit, or it would really open up the collective awareness of Black women if they understood why Black men have such a hard time seeking out mental health, why Black men have such a hard time expressing themselves emotionally. And there's a brother by the name of Kizzle. I remember his name now. He's on Instagram. He has a YouTube channel, a podcast. Real dope brother. He has a podcast platform called Express Yourself Black Man, where he brings on successful Black men. I don't even use that term, but Black men from all walks of life, let me say that, on his show
Hmm.
to express themselves. He has on his Instagram page, kind of like how your school teacher, I'm not sure if you remember this, or if you did this when you were in primary, if you did something bad, this is something I did when I was growing up, so I don't know if they still do this, but your teacher made you write whatever it was 100 times over on the board or on a piece of paper. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he does
Yeah.
that. He does that with certain affirmations for Black men. It'll be something like, Black men, you are worthy. And that's written 100 times across the page. And the next page, he'll, you know what I'm saying? So really dope, brother. There are
Yeah.
platforms, there are Black men who are out there trying their best to make that shift, to
Right.
say, "Hey, listen, it's okay to be not, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay
Hmm.
to exist. It's okay to be. It's okay to feel. It's okay to emote." And I think it's picking up some traction over the last few years that I've been paying attention to social media and watching certain brothers come out and all these platforms open up. Um, but no, I agree. I think Black men would be really, it would be beneficial for Black men to really stop for a moment and say, hey, what exactly are we doing to our sisters, both emotionally, physically, spiritually, psychologically, that's contributing negatively? You understand what I'm saying? So I appreciate you bringing that up. Um, there was something that I wanted to touch on really shortly, and that's a kind of something that I don't know if Black women collectively are cognizant of or if they're aware of even. And that is, so as a community, as a collective community for centuries, our non-melanated counterparts gave themselves or have given themselves centuries and centuries of head start, whether it be financially, socially, not financially, but economically, socially, educational wise, culturally, politically. So they've given themselves an advancement or a head start in those aspects. And within that very dichotomy, no one can deny this. Black women were also given to some degree a head start in some of those aspects as it pertains to us, Black men and Black women. The biggest one is education. And so
Right.
I think if Black women understood that and gave us grace or had just a mindset of understanding when it comes to where Black men are lacking or lagging, if that makes sense. There's not only hope for us as a community if Black women were to do that, but just as an entity on the planet. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not me saying Black women shouldn't go out and achieve education. Black women shouldn't go out and achieve financial status and in the job market and elevate themselves to, you know what I'm saying? Like that's not what I'm saying. That Black women shouldn't continue winning. No, Black women continue winning. Like, yes, I love when I see my sisters winning. However, at the same time, if Black women are winning at the detriment or at the indirect or direct expense of Black men or Black boys, that's problematic. It's very
Mhm.
problematic. Black boys are reading at a fourth grade level in middle school. That's a fact. There's no one can dispute that. No one can say, "Oh, that's not true." No, across the board, black, white, green, red, yellow. All people know that Black boys in education. I specifically know this personally because I've been an educator for the last 8 years. Black boys are reading at fourth grade levels in middle school, and so understanding that, I think really, really, really it would be a game changer. That when Black women win, if the winning doesn't involve or doesn't also encompass or embrace black men when they're winning as well,
Mhm.
it, the system is actually winning. It's not Black women who are winning, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So hopefully that makes sense. But I did want to elevate that so that that didn't go unspoken of or unspoken about. So
Right. Hmm.
what are your thoughts?
So you brought up the school thing, and what it made me think about is how black boys are raised. It's almost like they're raised to be not to be like consider themselves less than, but almost to anything that they aren't, a black woman will be for them.
Mm,
So it's kind of like they're raised to do the bare minimum. They're raised to take on, the least work in the house. If there's like a brother and a sister or whatever, the sister is usually doing most of the chores. She's usually like mama's helper, that kind of thing, especially if she's the oldest. She has more pressure on her. And so the little black boy, he just sees the women taking on most of the work, assuming this is a single parent home, right?
mhm,
And it's
mhm.
just the mother. Um, so he expects, it's almost like as he grows into an adult, he's expecting the black woman to do so much for him. And it enables him, honestly, to be what it is that he needs to be successful in those roles that black women are successful in.
Right,
And that's without, of course, the pressures from society, and that's without the influence of colonialism.
right.
So yeah, I think that's an interesting point. But for some reason, it just made me think about just how they're raised. Like literally, girls are taught to do more.
Right, right. No,
In
I
return,
completely understand that.
that's what makes a black woman a good wife, right? Because she's
Yeah,
doing so much, she's taking on so much, and that's what the black boys used to. But
yeah.
something that came to mind.
Um, Thank you for sharing that perspective and for your insight onto the thought itself. Last thing before we do close out, I did want to bring up a final thought, and this one is something that I personally can understand and relate to because I'm experiencing it. I'm living it. I've been living it for the last 4 years now since my last divorce. And that's Black women using their children against their children's fathers, or weaponizing their children against their children's fathers. Um, a lot of that I know comes from their own internal unresolved or unreconciled traumas and things that they haven't dealt with themselves personally from their parental dynamic or family's dynamic and setup, where their father may not have been there. And I say this to people, I don't think people understand this. This is a not just a fact, but it's a universal fact. Your relationship, so as an individual, the nature or the level or degree of your relationship between your mother and father will dictate and determine the level of it will determine your approach and level of healthiness with someone else of the opposite sex. So for example,
Yep.
like they say daddy issues or mama's boy, those terms being brought up a lot or being thrown around a lot. There's a reason why. Boys who have an unhealthy relationship with their mothers tend to seek unhealthy relationships from women. They tend to seek that same dynamic, that same setup from women. I had an unhealthy relationship with my mother, whether it's I was a mama's boy or I didn't care for my mom, I disrespected her. You're gonna try to find that from another woman. Girls subsequently aren't immune from that. Black girls
Right.
aren't immune from that. The level of relationship you have with your mother and father, that's how you're going to approach the opposite sex and or other women in general, which is hence why I've heard this a lot. Even my wife has said this. Black women, for some reason, cannot get along. Like there's just something about now. It's a weird thing. There's a sisterhood. There's a
Yeah.
personal I love my sister, but then there's also this thing where there's competition. There's
Yeah.
animosity. There's angst. There's envy. There's you know what I mean. Hence, Real
Yep.
Housewives, all these different shows. Like I don't get it, but I think you Black women who do weaponize their children against their children's fathers, they're just continuing the cycle. I don't think you understand. You're continuing whatever it is that you did not want for yourself or you don't
Mm-hmm.
want for your children. You're continuing it literally, whatever it is you're doing, or whatever narrative you're painting about the father, how you're treating the father, how you talk to your children about the father, what exactly, and it doesn't necessarily have to be direct either. It could be indirect. What you don't say in times
Yep.
when the children's father are brought up. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be direct. Oh,
Mhm.
your father's this, your father's that, your father. No. Sometimes you don't have to say anything. Actions speak. You know what I'm saying? So I think that right there is a good place to start collectively. I know this will probably fall on deaf ears, but stop using stop using children against us. It's terrible. It's
Yeah.
painful for everybody involved, including yourself. They're gonna grow up, and when they realize the truth, if that's something they want to, they're gonna say, "Well, dang," you know what I mean? Like
Hey.
you're
Yeah.
not escaping that. You're not escaping that trauma that you're passing on. They're gonna grow up. They're gonna say, "Oh, well, okay, this is what happened. He said this what happened. This is what you said happened. The truth in the middle is what I'm looking for. I'm gonna find it." You know what I mean? So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
So so I'll share two thoughts. I'm now try to make it quick, but um so the first thing, so I have unorthodox thoughts on parenthood anyway and procreation. So I'll be brief with this, but Black men also need to understand the risks that comes with pregnancy as well, and that being one of those risks, right? Like if you impregnate a woman who has unhealed childhood trauma or who has been through things that she just hasn't reconciled, and if you don't know her well enough, sometimes Black men just don't know what they're getting themselves into, and then your child becomes weaponized, right? Um, and then also, Black men just need to be supportive, like all the way supportive of, if you do really care for this woman and you do know her and you do know her triggers and things like that, be aware of the health side of it also, because Black men, I mean Black women, I believe it's like 3 times more likely to die during child labor in America. So that's a big number. Like they're dying the most just from giving birth, like something that we're supposed to be able to do naturally. And they're dying at this, during this time. And black men, I don't think they realize when you're asking a black woman to leave your legacy with her, it's at the expense of her mind, her body, her soul, like everything. Like she's literally putting her life on the line to give you a legacy that she hasn't even reconciled. Like she doesn't even know like what that means for her.
Yeah.
But she does know the risk and she does know the pain that comes with it and all of these things. So I don't think that is I'm not saying that black women should use that as a crutch. Obviously practice discernment, like be a woman, own up to what you have to own up to. But it's a lot for black
Yeah.
women. And, as long as black men are ready to like support and be there and fight for her when she's going through these things, like I feel like that would help. And then the second thing I wanted to share was my own experience in childhood. So feeling like as I was younger, I always questioned why my father wasn't around. I always questioned my mom. I would question my grandmother. And the answers that they would give me, I mean, like you said, sometimes silence is power. But for me, like the answer they gave me, they just seemed really vague. And I was always a really curious child. Like, well, that doesn't make sense. Or, and I would go to school and I'd be around young girls who would say, I don't have a dad, or my dad died, but he's alive, like saying crazy stuff like that. And I'm like, you have a dad because you're here. You're here just like me. Like both of us have dads. We
Right.
just learned what it takes to get here. So,
Right.
like learning things like that. So I feel like growing up and me not knowing my dad, I lean more towards being curious about it versus developing any type of resentment or being angry or anything like that with him because I didn't know his story. And if I didn't know both sides, I didn't believe one side. And that's just
Mhm.
how I've always been. So, luckily, at 24, I located my biological father. He's still living. He's well. I mean, he wasn't in the best predicament when I found him, but I do feel like my mom definitely has some unhealed things going on that she just didn't reconcile and pretty much weaponized me against him. And, he never had the chance to meet me. He never had the chance to see me. Like he was there, but never saw my face. Like, and it was just this whole situation. So yeah, it's not supportive. And we do, speaking from experience, we do grow up and we do start to ask those questions and we do start to wonder like why, what really, really happened. So yeah, stop
Wow.
doing that.
Thank you. I appreciate, no, I really do mean this when I say this. I appreciate your vulnerability and being aware of just the level of awareness it takes for you to have that understanding of the dynamic of your family and making peace. Sounds to me like you've made peace with both sides of your family, both your mother and your father, for whatever happened between the both of them. That's the first place to start. I really do mean that, and it's prevalent, or it's evidence in just the way you approach people and the way you talk to
Yeah,
people. I remember us when we first met on LinkedIn. I don't remember what it was, but I was like, "This is a dope sister. Like, let me connect with her. Let me figure out. Let me see." It was, and then when you jumped on the first season in that episode that we talked about, the topic was femininity. I was like,
hmm
after that episode, I was like, okay, yeah, I got to get her on here again. If I end up doing the second season, I got to get her on here again because it's
yeah.
dope, and that's evident of the work you've been doing, or you have been doing, or continuing to do still daily. And part of that is reconciling the whatever issues that happen between your mother and father. So, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We could talk. I can go on and just continue chatting with you, Jemiah, for until eternity.
Mhm.
But I do want to give space and let the audience let you share with the audience where they can find you, what platforms you're on, what projects you got coming up, anything that you want the audience to know. By all means, this is your floor.
Yeah. All right. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm sure he'll put this on LinkedIn like he puts the rest of his podcast on there. So if you all, are just interested in what I have to say, or if you have questions, definitely message me on there, connect with me on there. I'm not on any other platforms at this time. My biggest project right now is getting my apartment together. I don't know if y'all can hear the echo in here. It's empty because I just moved here in this apartment. So that's my biggest project. And like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm very passionate about the restaurant industry. So I'm getting ready to open up a restaurant with my new job. So that's another big project for me right now. So yeah, and I'm open to more conversations like this if anyone wants me on their podcast. And yeah, that is pretty much it. And I appreciate y'all for listening.
Thank you so much, Jemiah. I'm considering or thinking about doing or elevating this conversation a little bit more, and not just between you and I, but more individuals, more Black women, more Black men, so we can get a really robust and in-depth discussion about certain topics and really just end this stupid war. Like, who even, like, a war that we never even started to begin with. Like,
Right.
we're fighting a war we didn't start. How in the heck? But I get it. If you know the history, you understand how it all transpired, it will make sense. But thank you so much, Jemiah. I appreciate you for gracing me with your time. And until next time, I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Take care.